In the fog-shrouded Yorkshire Moors, a cryptic letter summons Hercule Poirot to Blackthorn Manor, where a priceless manuscript hides a deadly secret. When Sir Reginald Harwood is found stabbed in his library, the Codex Aurore points to a hidden fortune in jewels. As poison strikes again, Poirot unravels a web of betrayal, vengeance, and family secrets. With his razor-sharp mind, he confronts a killer lurking among the manor's inhabitants, revealing a truth as chilling as the Moors themselves. Will justice prevail? The game is afoot. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The train clattered rhythmically through the autumnal haze, its wheels singing a monotonous tune against the iron tracks. Hercule Poirot sat erect in the first-class compartment, his gloved hands folded neatly over a letter that had arrived at his London flat 2 days prior. The paper, heavy and embossed with the crest of Blackthorn Manor, bore the hurried yet elegant script of Sir Reginald Harwood, a man whose name carried the weight of industrial wealth and reclusive habits. The letter's contents were tantalizingly cryptic, an urgent summons to the remote Yorkshire estate for a matter of utmost gravity, with no further explanation. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, scanned the words again, his mind already weaving threads of possibility. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the faithful companion, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his honest face creased with scepticism. He peered through the window at the Yorkshire Moors, where mist curled like ghostly fingers over the heather-clad hills, obscuring the horizon in a shroud of grey. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, breaking the silence, "this whole business feels dashed peculiar. Why would a chap like Harwood, who shuns society like the plague, drag you all the way to this god-forsaken place? Sounds like a wild goose chase to me." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile, his meticulously groomed moustache twitching ever so slightly. "Mon ami, it is precisely because Sir Reginald avoids the world that we must be on our guard. The man who lives in isolation does not lack enemies. He merely fails to see them lurking in the shadows. This letter," he tapped the paper lightly, "it speaks of fear, Hastings. Fear disguised as urgency, and where there is fear, there is often a crime waiting to unfold." Hastings frowned, unconvinced. But what could he want? The man's richer than Croesus, owns half the factories in the north from what I hear. Surely he's got staff to handle his troubles. "Money, my dear Hastings, does not buy peace of mind," Poirot replied, his voice soft yet precise. "It buys secrets, and secrets breed danger. Sir Reginald's wealth may be the very reason we are summoned. We shall see." The train gave a lurch as it slowed, the platform of a small windswept station coming into view. A sign, weathered by the moorland gales, read, "Haworth." A carriage awaited them, its driver a taciturn man with a face as craggy as the surrounding hills. He tipped his cap without a word, loading their valises with practiced efficiency. The journey to Blackthorn Manor took them deeper into the moors, the road winding through a landscape that seemed to breathe unease. Gnarled trees stood sentinel, their branches clawing at the fog, and the distant cry of a curlew pierced the silence. Poirot, ever observant, noted the driver's calloused hands and the faint tremor in them as he gripped the reins. "You have served the Harwoods long?" he asked, his tone conversational yet probing. "Aye, nigh on 20 years, the driver grunted, eyes fixed on the road. "Sir Reginald's a hard man, but fair. Keeps to himself mostly. And yet he invites a detective from London." Poirot mused aloud, his words hanging in the air like the mist outside. The driver offered no reply, but his shoulders stiffened, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Blackthorn Manor emerged from the fog like a phantom, its grey stone towers rising stark against the twilight sky. The estate was a relic of another age, its Gothic arches and ivy-clad walls speaking of centuries past. yet its grandeur was tempered by an air of neglect. The carriage halted before the great oak doors, and Poirot descended, his patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the gravel. Hastings followed, clutching his overcoat against the biting wind. The doors swung open to reveal Mrs. Clara Harwood, Sir Reginald's second wife, a woman whose beauty was as striking as it was fragile. Her auburn hair was pinned in an elegant chignon, and her emerald gown shimmered in the lamplight, but her blue eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice warm yet strained, "we are so grateful you've come. And Captain Hastings, of course. Please, do come in." The hall was vast, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Harwoods, their eyes seeming to follow the newcomers. A grand staircase spiralled upward, its banisters gleaming with polish, yet the air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax. Clara led them to a drawing room where a fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room. "My husband will join us shortly," she said, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. "He's been preoccupied." "Preoccupied, madame?" Poirot inquired, his head tilted slightly, like a bird studying its prey. Clara hesitated, her gaze darting to the door. "Business matters, you understand. The estate, his collections. He's a man of many interests." Before Poirot could press further, the door opened, and Sir Reginald Harwood entered. He was a formidable figure, broad-shouldered and barrel-chested, with a mane of white hair and a face etched with the lines of authority. His eyes, however, were restless, darting from Poirot to Hastings and back. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I trust your journey was tolerable. I dislike dragging a man from London, but circumstances demand it." "Circumstances, Sir Reginald?" Poirot's tone was polite, but his eyes were unrelenting. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "We'll discuss it after dinner. I've no patience for mysteries on an empty stomach." Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where the table was set with silver and crystal that gleamed under a chandelier. The other guests were already seated. Lionel Harwood, Sir Reginald's son, a gaunt young man with the haunted eyes of an artist. Evelyn Harwood, his daughter, whose sharp features and sharper tongue suggested a restless spirit. Dr. Malcolm Vance, the family physician, a lean man with a guarded expression, and Miss Beatrice Lyle, Clara's companion, whose quiet demeanour and watchful gaze intrigued Poirot at once. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a claret of exceptional vintage. But the atmosphere was taut as a bowstring. Sir Reginald dominated the conversation, speaking of a rare manuscript, the Codex Aurore, which he had recently acquired. "A priceless artifact," he declared, his eyes glinting. "Some say it's cursed, but I say it's a treasure worth guarding. There are those who'd do anything to possess it." His gaze swept the table, lingering on each face, and Poirot noted the tension that rippled through the room. Clara dropped her fork, the clatter loud in the silence. Lionel stared into his wineglass, his fingers tight around the stem. Evelyn laughed, a brittle sound, and said, "Really, father, must you be so dramatic?" Dr. Vance murmured something about superstition, while Beatrice's eyes remained fixed on her plate, though Poirot caught the faintest tremble in her hands. As the meal ended and the party dispersed, Poirot lingered in the dining room, his fingers brushing the edge of the tablecloth. "Hastings," he said softly, "this household is a tapestry of secrets. The threads are knotted, but I, Hercule Poirot, shall unravel them." Outside, the Moors whispered in the darkness, and the air grew colder still. Chapter 2. The Gathering Storm. The wind howled across the Yorkshire Moors, a mournful wail that seemed to seep through the very stones of Blackthorn Manor. Hercule Poirot stood by the tall windows of the drawing-room, his small, immaculate figure silhouetted against the flickering firelight. The storm outside was gathering force, its gusts rattling the ancient panes and casting fleeting shadows, that danced like spectres across the oak-panelled walls. Poirot's green eyes, ever alert, surveyed the room, taking in the subtle tensions that lingered from dinner. The air was thick with unspoken words, and he sensed that the evening would bring more than just the tempest's bluster. Captain Hastings, seated in a high-backed chair near the hearth, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his honest face betraying his unease. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, his voice low to avoid carrying to the other guests. "There's something dashed odd about this lot. Did you see how they all jumped when Sir Reginald mentioned that Codex Aurore? It's as if they're all hiding something." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile, his meticulously groomed moustache twitching slightly. "Mon ami, you observe, but you do not see. The Codex, it is a spark, but the fire burns deeper. Each person at that table carries a secret, and secrets, Hastings, are the kindling of crime." The drawing room was a study in contrasts, opulent yet oppressive, its heavy velvet curtains and gilded frames at odds with the chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Mrs. Clara Harwood, Sir Reginald's young wife, sat at a rosewood piano, her delicate fingers hovering over the keys, but producing no sound. Her auburn hair caught the firelight, casting a halo that belied the nervous energy in her movements. She glanced frequently toward the door, as if expecting an unwelcome arrival. Across the room, Lionel Harwood, the brooding artist and heir, slouched in an armchair, sketching idly in a leather-bound notebook. His dark eyes were fixed on the page, but Poirot noted the tension in his grip, the pencil moving with a force that suggested anger rather than creativity. Evelyn Harwood, Sir Reginald's daughter, paced near a bookshelf, her sharp features set in a scowl. Her dark dress rustled with each step, and her quick, biting remarks during dinner echoed in Poirot's mind. She had a wit that cut like a blade, but there was a restlessness in her that spoke of deeper discontent. Dr. Malcolm Vance, the family physician, stood near the mantel, his lean frame rigid as he sipped a glass of brandy. His guarded expression and measured speech had intrigued Poirot at dinner. The man was too controlled, too careful. And then there was Miss Beatrice Lyle, Clara's companion, seated quietly in a corner with a piece of embroidery. Her serene demeanour was a mask, Poirot thought, for her eyes darted about the room, missing nothing. Sir Reginald himself had retired to his study after dinner, claiming urgent business. His absence was a palpable presence, as if his domineering spirit lingered in the room. Poirot had noted the way the family's dynamic shifted in his absence. Clara's nervousness intensified, Lionel's sullenness deepened, and Evelyn's pacing grew more agitated. The Codex Aurore, mentioned so pointedly at dinner, hung over the gathering like a storm cloud, its reputed value and mysterious origins fueling Poirot's curiosity. "Madame Harwood," Poirot said, approaching Clara with a courteous bow, "you seem troubled. Is it the storm outside, or something within these walls?" Clara started, her fingers brushing the piano keys and producing a discordant note. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot," she said, forcing a smile. "It's merely the weather. The moors are so wild in a storm. They unsettle me." Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic but his eyes piercing. "The moors, they are indeed formidable, but I think, perhaps, it is not only the wind that disturbs you. Sir Reginald summons to me. It suggests a matter most grave. You know of it, perhaps?" Clara's smile faltered, and she twisted the lace handkerchief in her lap. "Reginald doesn't confide in me about everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been preoccupied lately. The Codex, his business dealings. He's not himself." Before Poirot could press further, the door burst open, admitting a gust of cold air, and Sir Reginald himself. His white hair was dishevelled, and his eyes blazed with a mixture of irritation and unease. "Poirot," he barked, A word, if you please. In my study. Now. Hastings raised an eyebrow, but Poirot merely nodded, his composure unruffled. Of course, Sir Reginald. Lead the way. The study was a fortress of mahogany and leather, its walls lined with books and maps of the Yorkshire Moors. A massive desk dominated the room, cluttered with papers and a single ornate lamp that cast a pool of light over a leather-bound volume, the Codex Aurore. Sir Reginald motioned for Poirot to sit, but he himself remained standing, pacing like a caged lion. "I'll come to the point," Sir Reginald said, his voice low but intense. "I've reason to believe someone in this house means me harm. The Codex Aurore, it's not just a manuscript. It's a key to something far greater, something hidden on this estate. I've enemies, Poirot, and they're closer than I'd like." Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gaze fixed on Sir Reginald. "Enemies, monsieur? Within your own household?" Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "I trust no one. Not my wife, not my children, not even that damned doctor. Someone's been prying, asking questions about the Codex. I found papers disturbed in here last week, and yesterday a stranger was seen on the moors near the house. I need you to find out who's behind it before—" He trailed off, his eyes darting to the window, where the storm raged. "Before what, Sir Reginald?" Poirot prompted, his voice soft but insistent. "Before it's too late," Sir Reginald snapped. "That's all you need know for now. Watch them, Poirot. Watch them all." The interview was cut short by a sudden crash from the hall, followed by a sharp cry. Hastings, who had lingered outside the study, burst in, his face pale. "Poirot, it's Miss Lyle. She's fainted." The household converged in the hall, where Beatrice Lyle lay crumpled on the Persian rug, her embroidery hoop beside her. Dr. Vance knelt at her side, his fingers on her wrist, his expression unreadable. "She's coming round," he said, his voice clipped. "Just a faint. The storm, perhaps, or the strain of the evening." Clara hovered anxiously, fanning Beatrice with her handkerchief, while Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Really, Beatrice, must you be so dramatic?" she said, her tone cutting. Lionel, leaning against the wall, said nothing, but his eyes were fixed on Beatrice, with an intensity that Poirot noted. Poirot knelt beside Dr. Vance, his keen eyes scanning Beatrice's pale face. "Mademoiselle, what caused this distress?" he asked gently as her eyelids fluttered open. Beatrice's gaze was unfocused, her voice faint. I thought I saw someone at the window. A face, in the storm. It startled me." "A face!" Sir Reginald bellowed, striding to the nearest window and peering into the darkness. "Nonsense! The moors are empty tonight." But Poirot's attention was on Beatrice's hands, which clutched the embroidery hoop tightly. The needle had pricked her finger, a single drop of blood staining the fabric. "Curious," he murmured to himself, "that a mere glimpse should provoke such a reaction." The household retired soon after, the incident dismissed as nerves, but Poirot remained in the drawing room, his mind a whirlwind of observation. Hastings, lingering by the fire, said, "What do you make of it, Poirot?" "A face in the storm. Sounds like poppycock to me." "Perhaps, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice thoughtful. "But the imagination, it is a powerful thing. Or perhaps it is not imagination at all, but a glimpse of truth. We must be vigilant." The night deepened, and the storm grew fiercer, its howls mingling with the creaks of the old manor. Poirot, unable to sleep, paced his room, his little grey cells working tirelessly. He reviewed the evening's events: Sir Reginald's fear, Clara's anxiety, Lionel's brooding silence, Evelyn's sharp tongue, Dr. Vance's guarded demeanour, and Beatrice's faint. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. At precisely 2 a.m, a scream tore through the manor, high and piercing, shattering the uneasy silence. Hastings burst into Poirot's room, his dressing gown askew. "Poirot! That came from downstairs!" Poirot was already at the door, his silk robe impeccable despite the hour. "Calm yourself, Hastings. The little grey cells, they anticipated this moment. Let us descend." They hurried to the library, where the scream had originated. The heavy door stood ajar, and a cold draught swept through the room. The fire had died to embers, casting a dim glow over the scene. Clara Harwood stood trembling in the centre of the room, her nightgown ghostly white in the half-light. She pointed to the window, her voice shaking. "I saw it again, a figure out there, in the storm." Poirot moved swiftly to the window, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond. The rain lashed the panes, but there was no sign of any figure. He turned to Clara, his expression grave. "Madame, you must tell me precisely what you saw." "It was a man," she whispered, clutching her shawl. Tall, cloaked, standing just beyond the terrace. He was watching the house. Poirot's gaze shifted to the library's contents, the shelves of leather-bound books, the heavy desk, and the lectern where the Codex Aurore rested, its cover gleaming faintly. He approached the manuscript, his fingers hovering over it without touching. "And you came to the library at this hour because—" "I couldn't sleep," Clara said, her voice barely audible. "I thought I'd read, to calm my nerves. Then I saw him." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, muttered, "This is getting stranger by the minute. Do you think it's connected to Sir Reginald's fears?" Poirot did not reply immediately. Instead, he examined the window, noting the latch was secure, the frame undisturbed. "The storm, it plays tricks on the mind," he said at last, but his tone suggested he believed otherwise. "Madame, you must rest. We will investigate further in the morning." As Clara was led away by a sleepy housemaid, Poirot lingered in the library, his eyes sweeping the room. "Hastings," he said softly, "this house is a stage, and we are witnessing the opening act of a drama. The Codex Aurore is the centerpiece, but the motives, they are many and tangled." They returned to their rooms, but Poirot's mind was far from rest. He sat by his window, watching the storm rage across the moors, his thoughts as relentless as the wind. The household was a cauldron of suspicion, each member a potential player in a deadly game. Sir Reginald's fear of betrayal, Clara's nocturnal wanderings, Beatrice's faint, and the elusive figure in the storm. All were clues, fragments of a truth that Poirot was determined to uncover. As the first light of dawn crept over the moors, painting the sky in hues of grey and gold, Poirot rose, his resolve unshaken. "The gathering storm, Hastings," he murmured. "It is not only outside, it is within these walls, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall face it." Chapter 3. The Body in the Library. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor with a pallor that matched the mood within its walls. The storm had subsided, leaving a heavy mist that clung to the moors like a shroud. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, stood in the library, his small, precise figure a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted. The room, with its towering bookshelves and heavy velvet drapes, was now a stage for tragedy. Sir Reginald Harwood lay sprawled across the Turkish rug, his once commanding presence reduced to a lifeless heap. A jewelled dagger, its hilt gleaming in the weak morning light, protruded from his chest, and a thin trickle of blood had pooled beneath him, staining the intricate patterns of the carpet. Captain Hastings, standing near the door, clutched his hat, his face ashen. "Good Lord, Poirot," he whispered, his voice thick with shock. "He's dead, murdered, right under our noses." Poirot's green eyes, sharp and unyielding, surveyed the scene with clinical precision. "Oui, mon ami," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "A crime most audacious committed in the heart of this house. But fear not, Hastings. The little grey cells, they are already at work." The library was a cavern of shadows, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and wax. The Codex Aurora rested on its lectern, untouched, its leather cover catching the light from a single candelabrum. A tall window stood slightly ajar, admitting a chill draught that stirred the drapes. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his patent leather shoes silent on the rug as he knelt beside the body. He noted the angle of the dagger, the rigidity of Sir Reginald's limbs, and the expression of surprise frozen on his face. The blow was swift, he murmured, delivered with force and certainty. This was no act of impulse. Hastings, still reeling, gestured toward the window. Could it have been an intruder, Poirot? Clara said she saw a figure last night, and Beatrice mentioned a face in the storm. Perhaps someone came in from the moors. Poirot rose, brushing an invisible speck from his sleeve, and approached the window. He examined the frame, his fingers tracing the edges with meticulous care. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to the sill. "The dust here is undisturbed, the latch unmarred. If an intruder entered, they left no trace. A feat most improbable in such a storm. None. This crime was committed by someone within these walls." Before Hastings could respond, the door swung open, and Clara Harwood stumbled in, her auburn hair dishevelled, her eyes wide with horror. "Reginald!" she gasped, clutching the doorframe for support. "Oh God, no!" She swayed, and Hastings rushed to steady her, guiding her to a chair. "Madame, compose yourself," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm. "You must tell me when you last saw your husband alive." Clara's hands trembled as she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. "Last night, after I saw that figure outside. He was in his study working. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I heard nothing until—" Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. The household began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Lionel Harwood entered, his gaunt face pale, his artist's hands clenched into fists. Evelyn followed, her sharp features set in a mask of defiance, though her eyes flickered with unease. Dr. Malcolm Vance arrived next, his medical bag in hand, his expression one of professional detachment, tinged with something Poirot could not yet name. Miss Beatrice Lyle was the last to appear, her serene composure fractured, her embroidery hoop clutched like a talisman. "What the devil's happened?" Lionel demanded, his voice hoarse. "Father, is he really dead?" Dr. Vance knelt beside the body, his fingers probing with clinical efficiency. "Dead for several hours," he confirmed, his tone clipped. "The wound is deep, straight to the heart. Death would have been near instantaneous." Evelyn's laugh was brittle, cutting through the tension. "Well, that's one way to settle his obsession with that wretched codex. Who did it then? One of us?" "Evelyn!" Clara snapped, her voice sharp with reproach. "How can you be so callous?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Mesdames, messieurs, accusations will not serve us now. We must have order, method. The truth, it will reveal itself in time." The arrival of Inspector Grange, a burly man with a weathered face and a no-nonsense demeanour, brought a new layer of authority to the scene. Summoned by a frantic housemaid, he surveyed the library with a practised eye, his notebook already open. "Right then," he said, his Yorkshire accent thick. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong. That codex thing. Valuable, isn't it? Someone must have come for it." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of disagreement. "Non, Inspector," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "The codex remains untouched. A thief would not leave such a prize. This murder, it is personal, rooted in motives we have yet to uncover." Grange raised an eyebrow, clearly sceptical, but he nodded. "Fair enough, Mr. Poirot. You've a reputation. I'll give you that. Let's hear what the family has to say." Poirot gathered the household around the library's long table, away from the grim spectacle of Sir Reginald's body. Inspector Grange stood by, his pencil poised, while Hastings hovered near Poirot, his expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Poirot's gaze moved from face to face, noting every gesture, every flicker of emotion. "Madame Harwood," he began, addressing Clara, "you saw a figure last night. Can you describe it further?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. It was dark, and the rain was heavy. A tall figure, cloaked, perhaps in black. I couldn't see a face, but it felt menacing. "And you, Mademoiselle Lyle," Poirot said, turning to Beatrice. "You spoke of a face at the window during your faint. Was it the same?" Beatrice's fingers tightened on her embroidery hoop, her voice low. "I'm not certain. It was a fleeting glimpse. A pale face, I thought, but the storm was so wild. It could have been my imagination." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Imagination, mademoiselle, or a convenient distraction?" Beatrice flinched, but before she could respond, Evelyn interjected, her voice sharp. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, are we to be interrogated like common criminals? My father was a difficult man, but none of us would stoop to this." "Difficult, mademoiselle?" Poirot's tone was deceptively mild. "In what way?" Evelyn's lips tightened, but she said nothing, her gaze dropping to the table. Lionel, however, spoke up, his voice low and bitter. "He controlled everything, our lives, our money, our futures. That codex was his latest obsession, keeping us all on edge. But murder? That's absurd." Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his voice measured. "Sir Reginald was in good health despite his age. No medical issues that would suggest a natural death. The dagger wound is precise, suggesting some skill or at least determination." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. "And you, Doctor, where were you last night after dinner?" Vance's expression remained impassive. "In my room, reviewing patient notes. I heard nothing until Clara's scream." The questioning continued, but no one admitted to hearing or seeing anything beyond the storm's tumult. Inspector Grange, growing impatient, declared his intent to search the grounds for signs of an intruder. Poirot, however, remained focused on the library. He returned to the body, his eyes lingering on the dagger's hilt, which bore an intricate design of intertwining vines. "This weapon," he said to Hastings, "it is not a common one. It belongs to this house, I think." Hastings frowned. "How can you be sure, Poirot? It could have been brought in." Poirot pointed to a display case on the wall, where a collection of antique blades was mounted. One slot was conspicuously empty. "The dagger, it matches those in the case. The murderer did not need to bring a weapon. They found one here." As Grange's men began their search, Poirot examined the Codex Aurore more closely. The manuscript, bound in cracked leather, was filled with illuminated pages and cryptic symbols. He noted a faint smudge on the lectern, as if someone had touched it recently, but the book itself was pristine. "Curious," he murmured. "The Codex is the lure, yet it remains untouched. Why?" Hastings, pacing nervously, said, "Perhaps the killer was interrupted. Clara's scream might have scared them off." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, but his tone suggested doubt. "Or perhaps the Codex is not the true motive. We must look deeper, Hastings, into the hearts of those who shared this house with Sir Reginald." The morning wore on, the household retreating to their rooms under Grange's orders to remain available. Poirot lingered in the library, his mind a whirl of observations. Clara's fear, Beatrice's evasiveness, Evelyn's defiance, Lionel's resentment, Vance's detachment. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. As he stood by the window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded moors, he murmured, "The body in the library, it is but the beginning. The truth, it lies hidden. But I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it." Chapter 4. Secrets of the Moors. The mist hung low over the Yorkshire Moors, a spectral veil that softened the harsh lines of the landscape and muffled the sounds of the morning. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of Blackthorn Manor's gravel drive, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp chill. The death of Sir Reginald Harwood had, cast a pall over the household, and the air seemed to hum with suspicion. Beside him, Captain Hastings stamped his feet to ward off the cold, his breath forming clouds in the grey light. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "this place gives me the creeps. All this talk of figures in the storm and cursed manuscripts. It's like something out of a Gothic novel." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a hint of amusement, though his expression remained grave. "Mon ami, the Moors, they are indeed dramatic, but it is the human heart that writes the true story. We must venture into this landscape to uncover its secrets, for they are entwined with the tragedy within the manor." Their guide was Tom Rourke, the estate's groundskeeper, a wiry man with a face weathered by years of wind and rain. His eyes, sharp beneath a battered cap, betrayed a wariness that Poirot noted at once. Rourke led them along a narrow path that wound through the heather, his boots crunching against the sodden earth. "Mind your step, gents," he said, his Yorkshire accent thick. "The moors are treacherous this time of year. Bogs'll swallow a man whole if he's not careful." Poirot, ever meticulous, picked his way with care, his patent leather shoes an incongruous sight among the rough terrain. "Monsieur Rourke," he began, his tone conversational yet probing, "you have served the Harwoods long, yes? You know the Moors well, and perhaps the family's secrets as well." Rourke's shoulders stiffened, but he kept his gaze on the path. "Aye, nigh on 30 years. I keep the grounds, not their business. Sir Reginald, he weren't one for sharing his thoughts with the likes of me. And yet," Poirot pressed, "you see much, do you not? The comings and goings, the moods of the household. Tell me, what have you observed in recent days?" Rourke hesitated, his eyes flickering to the horizon where the mist seemed to pulse with hidden shapes. "There's been odd things," he admitted at last. "Master Lionel, he's been out here at all hours, sketching or wandering. Says it's for his art, but he's not himself. And there was a stranger, maybe 3 nights back, near the old oak. Didn't get a good look, but he weren't local." Hastings perked up, his curiosity piqued. A stranger. Could it be the figure Clara and Beatrice saw? "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. "Or perhaps it is a convenient tale to distract us. Tell me, Monsieur Rourke, what do the Moors whisper of this Codex Aurore?" Rourke's face darkened, and he spat into the heather. "Old tales, sir. They say it's a map to a treasure hidden hereabouts, from the days when monks fled the monasteries. Some call it cursed, saying those who seek it meet ill ends. Sir Reginald, he was mad for it, digging into every legend he could find." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "A treasure, you say? And where might such a treasure be hidden?" Rourke shrugged, pointing to a distant rise where a gnarled oak stood sentinel. "That's the old oak, where the tales point. But I ain't seen no treasure, and I don't care to look. The Moors keep their secrets, and I let 'em." They reached the oak, its twisted branches clawing at the sky. Poirot examined the ground, noting the churned earth, as if someone had been digging recently. "Curious," he murmured, his fingers brushing the bark. "Someone has been here, and not long ago." Back at the manor, the household was subdued, the weight of Sir Reginald's death pressing heavily. Poirot gathered the family in the drawing room, its fire doing little to dispel the chill. Inspector Grange had returned to the village to coordinate his men, leaving Poirot to pursue his own inquiries. Clara sat by the window, her face pale, her hands twisting a silk scarf. Lionel slouched in a corner, his sketchbook closed, his eyes distant. Evelyn stood by the mantel, her arms crossed, her expression defiant. Dr. Vance, his medical bag at his side, maintained his air of detachment, while Beatrice worked at her embroidery, her needle moving with a precision that belied her nervous glances. "Mesdames, messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the silence. "The death of Sir Reginald is a wound to this house, but to heal it, we must uncover the truth. Each of you holds a piece of the puzzle. I ask you now to speak plainly. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke first. I've told you all I know, Monsieur Poirot. That figure in the storm, it frightened me. Reginald was so secretive about the codex, always locking himself in his study. I once heard him arguing with someone, a week ago, but I couldn't hear who. Poirot's eyes narrowed. An argument, madame. Can you recall any words? Clara shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. Only that it was heated. Reginald was shouting about betrayal, saying he'd never let it fall into the wrong hands. Lionel shifted uncomfortably, his voice low. Father was always paranoid. He thought everyone was after his precious manuscript. He cut my allowance last month, said I was wasting my life on art. If you're looking for motives, you might start there. But I didn't kill him. Evelyn's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. Oh, Lionel, don't be so noble. Father was a tyrant, and we all resented him. But let's not pretend we're the only ones with secrets. Her gaze flicked to Dr. Vance, who stiffened. Miss Harwood, Vance said, his tone cool. I was Sir Reginald's physician, nothing more. My only concern was his health, which, as I've said, was robust until this. Poirot turned to Beatrice, whose needle paused mid-stitch. And you, Mademoiselle Lyle. You have been quiet, yet I sense you see more than you say. Beatrice's cheeks flushed, but her voice was steady. I'm only Clara's companion, monsieur. Poirot. I try to stay out of family matters, but I did overhear something a few days ago. Sir Reginald was in the library with a visitor, a man I didn't recognize. They spoke of the codex, and the man seemed angry, saying he'd been promised something. Poirot's head tilted, his eyes gleaming. A visitor, mademoiselle, and you did not see his face? No, Beatrice said, her gaze dropping to her embroidery. I was in the hall, and the door was nearly closed. I didn't want to intrude. Hastings, standing by the door, whispered to Poirot, This is getting murkier by the minute. A stranger on the moors, a mysterious visitor. How do we sort it all out? Patience, Hastings, Poirot replied softly. The truth, it is like the mist on the moors. It shifts, but it cannot hide forever. After the interviews, Poirot requested access to Sir Reginald's study. The room was a fortress of order, every paper neatly filed, every book precisely placed. The desk held a stack of letters, one of which caught Poirot's eye, a note in a hurried scrawl, unsigned, warning Sir Reginald to relinquish the codex or face consequences. Poirot tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. He then turned to the Codex Aurore, still on its lectern in the library. With the family's permission, he opened it, his gloved fingers turning the brittle pages with care. The text was in Latin, interspersed with symbols that hinted at a code. A folded sheet, tucked between the pages, revealed a crude map of the estate, with the old oak marked prominently. The Moors, they do indeed hold secrets, Poirot murmured. That afternoon, Poirot and Hastings returned to the oak, accompanied by Rourke. The groundskeeper watched uneasily as Poirot examined the tree more closely, his fingers probing the roots. A hollow sound rewarded his efforts, and with Rourke's reluctant help, they uncovered a small iron door, rusted but intact, hidden beneath the earth. Inside was a stone chamber, empty save for a single dusty ledger. Poirot opened it, revealing accounts of transactions dating back decades, Sir Reginald's financial dealings, some of which hinted at ill-gotten gains. This, Poirot said, holding up the ledger, is a motive in itself. But is it the motive? As they returned to the manor, the mist thickened, and Poirot's mind churned. The stranger on the moors, the visitor in the library, the ledger, the codex, all were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to betrayal. But whose? Clara's fear, Lionel's resentment, Evelyn's defiance, Vance's reticence, Beatrice's secrecy. Each was a thread, and Poirot was determined to weave them into clarity. Back in the drawing room, He faced the household once more. "The Moors have spoken," he said, his voice resonant. "They tell of hidden truths, of greed and vengeance. But the heart of this crime lies here, among you. I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover it." The fire crackled, and, outside, the Moors whispered their secrets into the gathering dusk. Chapter 5. The Second Strike. The morning after the discovery of the hidden ledger, Blackthorn Manor seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls anticipated further calamity. The mist outside had lifted slightly, revealing the stark beauty of the Yorkshire Moors. But within the manor, the atmosphere was thick with dread. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a beacon of order amidst the chaos, sat in the drawing room, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The little grey cells, as he called them, were in ceaseless motion, piecing together the fragments of Sir Reginald Harwood's murder. The ledger, with its cryptic entries of financial misdeeds, had opened a new avenue of inquiry, but Poirot sensed the mystery was far from solved. Captain Hastings, pacing near the fireplace, broke the silence. "Poirot, this place is a powder keg. First Sir Reginald, now that ledger. Do you think the killer's after some hidden fortune? And what about that stranger Rourke mentioned? It's all so confoundedly tangled." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. "Patience, mon ami. The threads, they are many, but they will form a pattern. The ledger suggests greed, but murder, that is often born of passion or revenge. We must observe closely, for the next act is upon us." His words proved prophetic. As the clock struck 11, a cry rang out from the garden, sharp and urgent. Poirot and Hastings rushed outside, joined by Clara Harwood, whose face was pale with alarm. The garden, a maze of neatly trimmed hedges and late-blooming roses, was bathed in the weak light of a clouded sun. There, crumpled beneath an arbour, lay Dr. Malcolm Vance, his face grey, his breathing shallow. A silver teacup lay overturned beside him, its contents staining the grass. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, kneeling beside the doctor. He sniffed the cup, his nose wrinkling at the faint, bitter scent. "Belladonna," he murmured, his voice grim. "A poison most insidious." Clara clutched her shawl, her eyes wide. "Is he dead?" "Not yet, madam," Poirot replied, his fingers probing Vance's pulse. "He lives, but barely. We must act swiftly." Lionel Harwood appeared, his artist's hands trembling as he surveyed the scene. "What's happened? Vance, was he attacked?" Evelyn, arriving moments later, let out a sharp gasp, her usual defiance replaced by genuine concern. "Malcolm!" she cried, rushing to his side. "Who did this?" Beatrice Lyle, ever composed, stood at the edge of the group, her embroidery hoop absent for once. Her eyes, however, were sharp, taking in every detail. Poirot noted her silence, his mind filing it away for later scrutiny. A housemaid was dispatched to fetch the village doctor, while Poirot and Hastings carried Vance to a guest room. The manor's staff, shaken but efficient, brought blankets and hot water. Poirot examined the teacup more closely, noting its delicate pattern, a match for the set used at breakfast. "Curious," he said to Hastings. "This cup was near Madame Harwood's usual seat at the table. An error, perhaps, or a deliberate misdirection." Hastings frowned, his honest face creased with worry. "You mean someone meant to poison Clara? But why spare her and go for Vance?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "The why, Hastings, is the key. But first, we must ensure the doctor survives to tell us what he knows." The village doctor, a gruff man named Dr. Ellis, arrived promptly, his bag bristling with instruments. After a tense examination, he administered an antidote, muttering about the dangers of belladonna. "He's lucky," Ellis said, wiping his brow. "A few more minutes, and he'd be gone. He'll be weak, but he should pull through." As Vance rested, Poirot gathered the household in the dining room, where the breakfast table still bore the remnants of the morning's meal. Inspector Grange, summoned once more, stood by the door, his notebook open, his expression one of barely concealed frustration. "Another attack?" he growled. "This is getting out of hand, Mr. Poirot. First a stabbing, now poison. What's next?" "Order, Inspector," Poirot said calmly. "We must have method. The poison was in the tea, yes? Who prepared it, and who served it?" The housekeeper, Mrs. Dobbs, a stout woman with a no-nonsense air, stepped forward. "I brewed the tea myself, sir, same as always. The pot was on the sideboard, and everyone helped themselves. I didn't notice anything amiss." Poirot's gaze swept the table, noting the placement of the cups. "And yet the poison found its way to Dr. Vance. Madame Harwood, you sat near him, did you not?" Clara nodded, her hands twisting her scarf. "Yes, but I didn't take tea this morning. I wasn't feeling well." Evelyn's eyes flashed. "Are you suggesting someone tried to kill Clara and got Malcolm by mistake? That's absurd." "Absurd, mademoiselle?" Poirot's voice was soft but piercing. "Or is it that the truth is uncomfortable? Dr. Vance, he is close to you, is he not?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "We're engaged, if that's what you mean. Father disapproved, but that's no reason to poison anyone." Poirot turned to Beatrice, whose composure was a mask of serenity. "Mademoiselle Lyle, you were at breakfast. Did you observe anything unusual?" Beatrice's needle paused, though she held no embroidery now. "I noticed Dr. Vance seemed distracted," she said, her voice low. "He was speaking with Lionel about something. I didn't catch the details." Lionel's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "We were discussing art, that's all. Vance fancies himself a collector." "Don't drag me into this." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "No one is dragged, monsieur. The truth, it pulls us all toward it." As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered by the sideboard, examining the teapot and remaining cups. He found no trace of poison, but the placement of the cups intrigued him. Vance's cup had been near Clara's usual place, yet she had not taken tea. A mistake, or a calculated act? He filed the question away, his mind turning to the ledger and the Codex Aurore. That afternoon, Poirot revisited Beatrice in the conservatory, where she sat with her embroidery, the glass walls misted with condensation. "Mademoiselle," he said, his tone gentle but insistent, "you spoke of overhearing Sir Reginald with a visitor. You also fainted at the sight of a face in the storm. I think perhaps you know more than you have shared." Beatrice's needle stilled, her eyes meeting his. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm a companion, nothing more. I don't pry into the family's affairs." "And yet," Poirot said, leaning closer, "your father was a scholar, was he not? A man who studied manuscripts, perhaps even the Codex Aurore." Beatrice's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on the hoop. "How did you know that?" "The little grey cells, mademoiselle. They see connections where others see only coincidence. Your father's work, it brought you here, yes?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He was obsessed with the Codex, years ago. He believed it held secrets to a fortune. It ruined him. I came to Blackthorn to escape that past, not to chase it." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was relentless. "And yet, the past, it follows us. Did you seek the Codex for yourself or for revenge?" Beatrice's eyes flashed with something like fear, but she said nothing more. Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Merci, mademoiselle. We shall speak again." Back in the library, Poirot examined the Codex once more, its pages whispering of ancient secrets. The map he had found within it pointed to the old oak, but the ledger suggested a different motive. Money, perhaps, or power. He turned to Hastings, who was flipping through a book of local legends. "Hastings, what do you make of Dr. Vance's survival?" Hastings frowned. "Lucky, I suppose. But if the poison was meant for Clara, someone's playing a dangerous game. And if it was meant for Vance, Why? Précisément, Poirot said. The second strike, it is a warning, or a miscalculation. We must discover which. As evening fell, the manor grew quiet, the household retreating to their rooms under the weight of suspicion. Poirot stood by the library window, gazing out at the moors, where the mist seemed to pulse with secrets. The game, it grows more dangerous, he murmured, but I, Hercule Poirot, shall not falter. Chapter 6. The Codex Unveiled. The Yorkshire Moors lay under a restless sky, the clouds shifting uneasily, as if mirroring the turmoil within Blackthorn Manor. The poisoning of Dr. Malcolm Vance, though not fatal, had deepened the sense of foreboding that permeated the house. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a beacon of precision amidst the chaos, stood in the library, his green eyes fixed on the Codex Aurore. The manuscript, with its ancient leather binding and cryptic symbols, seemed to pulse with secrets, its presence a silent challenge to the detective's formidable intellect. The ledger found beneath the old oak had hinted at Sir Reginald Harwood's hidden wealth, but Poirot sensed that the codex held the key to the motives driving the crimes. Captain Hastings, seated in a worn leather armchair, rubbed his temples, his face etched with frustration. Poirot, this case is like trying to navigate the moors in a fog. The ledger points to money, the codex to some ancient treasure, and now Vance nearly poisoned. How does it all fit together? Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. Mon ami, the puzzle, it is complex, but not insoluble. The Codex Aurore, it is the pivot around which these events turn. We must uncover its true significance, not as a relic, but as a catalyst for human passion. The library was quiet, save for the faint crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind. The jewelled dagger that had ended Sir Reginald's life had been removed by Inspector Granger's men, but its absence left a palpable void, as if the room itself mourned its master. Poirot approached the lectern where the codex rested, his gloved fingers turning the pages with reverence. The text, a mix of Latin and arcane symbols, was interspersed with delicate illuminations, golden vines, celestial motifs, and cryptic annotations. Tucked within a fold of the binding, he found another clue, a small, folded parchment, its edges brittle with age. It bore a sequence of numbers and a single word, vault. Regardez, Hastings, Poirot said, holding up the parchment. A cipher, perhaps, or a direction. The codex, it is more than a manuscript. It is a guide. Hastings leaned closer, his brow furrowed. A vault? You mean there's actually a treasure hidden here, like Rourke's stories? Perhaps, Poirot replied, his voice thoughtful. But treasures, they are not always gold. Sometimes they are secrets worth killing for. Determined to test his theory, Poirot requested the family's permission to explore the estate further. Clara Harwood, still shaken by the events, granted it with a weary nod, her auburn hair falling loosely about her pale face. Lionel, sullen and withdrawn, muttered his assent, while Evelyn, her sharp features set in defiance, demanded to know what Poirot hoped to find. Dr. Vance, recovering but weak, remained in his room, attended by the village doctor. Beatrice Lyle, as always, watched in silence, her embroidery hoop a constant companion. With Tom Rourke as their guide, Poirot and Hastings returned to the moors, the parchment clutched in Poirot's hand. The groundskeeper's unease was palpable, his eyes darting to the shadows as they approached the old oak once more. "You're poking into things best left alone, sir," Rourke warned, his voice low. "That vault, if it exists, ain't brought nothing but trouble." Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Trouble, Monsieur Rourke, is my profession. Lead on." The oak stood like a sentinel, its gnarled branches casting jagged shadows. Poirot studied the parchment's numbers. Coordinates, he deduced, relative to the tree. With Rourke's reluctant assistance, They measured paces from the trunk, arriving at a patch of earth near a cluster of ancient stones. The ground here was uneven, and Poirot's keen eyes spotted a faint depression, as if the soil had been disturbed and resettled. "Here," he said, pointing. "We dig." Rourke fetched a spade, and after a tense half-hour, they uncovered a stone slab, its surface carved with symbols matching those in the codex. With effort, they lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Hastings, ever cautious, hesitated. "Poirot, are you sure about this? It looks like a tomb." "A tomb, perhaps," Poirot replied. "Or a treasure trove. We shall see." Armed with a lantern from Rourke, they descended into a small damp chamber. The air was thick with the scent of earth and time, and the walls were lined with moss-covered stone. At the chamber's centre stood a wooden chest, its iron bands rusted but intact. Poirot opened it with care, revealing a cache of glittering jewels, emeralds, sapphires and diamonds nestled in velvet. Beside them was a sealed envelope, addressed to Sir Reginald in a spidery hand. Poirot opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the letter within. It was from Sir Reginald's late brother, Edward, dated 20 years prior. The letter spoke of a family secret. The jewels, amassed through questionable means, were hidden to protect the Harwood name. Edward urged his brother to safeguard them, warning of those who might seek to claim them unjustly. "So," Poirot murmured, "the codex was a map, and the jewels the true prize." Hastings whistled softly. "Good heavens, Poirot! This must be worth a fortune. Do you think Sir Reginald was killed for this?" "It is possible," Poirot said, closing the chest. "But the heart of this crime, it beats with more than greed. We must return to the manor and confront the living." Back at Blackthorn Manor, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, the chest placed discreetly in a corner, covered with a cloth. The fire cast long shadows, and the tension was palpable. Clara sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly. Lionel's eyes were dark with suspicion, while Evelyn's defiance seemed tempered by unease. Beatrice, as ever, was a study in composure, her needle moving steadily through her embroidery. Dr. Vance, supported by a cane, joined them, his face pale but resolute. "Mesdames, messieurs," Poirot began, his voice commanding attention. "The Codex Aurore has... I yielded its secret. Beneath the old oak lies a vault, and within it, a fortune in jewels, Sir Reginald's true legacy. I ask you now, who among you knew of this?" A murmur rippled through the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. "Jewels? I had no idea. Reginald never spoke of such things." Lionel's jaw tightened, his voice bitter. "Father always kept his secrets close. If he hid a fortune, it was to control us, even from the grave." Evelyn's laugh was sharp. "Typical. He dangled that codex like a carrot, and we all danced to his tune. But jewels, that's a motive for murder, Monsieur Poirot." Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his voice weak but steady. "I knew nothing of a vault. Sir Reginald consulted me only on medical matters. But I'll admit, he was obsessed with that manuscript. It consumed him." Beatrice's needle paused, her eyes meeting Poirot's briefly before dropping back to her work. "I told you, Monsieur Poirot, my father studied the codex. He believed it led to something valuable, but I never knew what." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, his mind cataloguing her every gesture. "And yet, mademoiselle, you came to this house. Was it truly only to serve Madame Harwood, or did the codex draw you here?" Beatrice's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, her silence as eloquent as words. Poirot turned to the group, his voice resonant. "The jewels, they are a motive, yes, but they are not the whole story. Sir Reginald's death, Dr. Vance's poisoning. These acts speak of personal vendettas, of betrayals long buried. I shall uncover them." As the household dispersed, Hastings pulled Poirot aside, his voice low. "Poirot, you're stirring up a hornet's nest. If those jewels are the motive, anyone could be next. And what about that letter? Edward Harwood's warning. It's like a ghost from the past. Précisément, Hastings, Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. The past, it is never truly gone. It haunts this house, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall lay its ghosts to rest. That evening, as the moors grew dark, Poirot sat in the library. The codex open before him. The jewels were secure, locked in the Manor's safe under Inspector Granger's supervision. But their discovery had shifted the dynamics of the house. Suspicion hung heavy, and Poirot knew the killer was watching, waiting. The codex, unveiled at last, had revealed its treasure, but the true cost of its secrets was yet to be paid. Chapter 7. The Unmasking. The air in Blackthorn Manor was heavy with the weight of secrets unveiled. The discovery of the hidden jewels beneath the old oak casting a new light on the motives behind Sir Reginald Harwood's murder. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the heart of the Manor's tragedy. His small, precise figure, a beacon of clarity amidst the gathering shadows. The Codex Aurora rested on its lectern, its pages now silent, their secrets laid bare. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, its glow illuminating the faces of the assembled household, each etched with a mix of dread and anticipation. The hour of truth, Poirot knew, had arrived. Captain Hastings, standing near the door, shifted uneasily, his honest face reflecting the strain of the past days. "Poirot," he whispered, "this feels like the calm before the storm. You're about to turn this house upside down, aren't you?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching with the faintest hint of a smile. "Mon ami, the storm has already broken. Now, we gather the pieces and construct the truth. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly, and they will not disappoint." Inspector Grange, his burly frame filling a corner of the room, held his notebook with a grip that betrayed his impatience. "Let's have it, Mr. Poirot," he said, his Yorkshire accent gruff. "You've been poking about, turning up jewels and secrets. Who's the killer then?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture commanding silence. "Patience, Inspector. The crime, it is like a tapestry. Each thread must be examined before the pattern is clear. We shall begin with the facts, and from them, the truth will emerge." The household was gathered around the long library table. Clara Harwood, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her hands clasped in her lap. Lionel Harwood, his brooding eyes fixed on the floor. Evelyn Harwood, her sharp features tense with defiance. Dr. Malcolm Vance, pale but upright, leaning on his cane. And Beatrice Lyle, her embroidery hoop absent, her serene mask beginning to crack. The air was taut, as if the room itself held its breath. "Mesdames, Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant. "The murder of Sir Reginald Harwood was no act of chance, no robbery gone astray. It was a crime of precision, driven by motives deep and personal. The Codex Aurora, with its promise of treasure, was the lure, but the jewels in the vault, they were the heart of the matter. Let us unravel this tragedy step by step." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving from face to face. Sir Reginald was a man of secrets, a man who controlled his family with an iron hand. The jewels hidden for decades were his true legacy, a fortune amassed through means not entirely honourable, as the ledger revealed. He guarded this secret with the codex, a map disguised as a manuscript, but someone in this house knew or suspected and sought to claim it. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, I knew nothing of the jewels. Reginald was secretive, yes, but I thought it was only the codex that obsessed him." Poirot nodded, his gaze sympathetic but unrelenting. "Madame, your fear was genuine, but your nocturnal wanderings, your sighting of a figure in the storm, suggest you sensed danger. Perhaps you heard more than you have told." Clara's cheeks flushed, but she shook her head. I've told you everything. I was frightened, that's all. Poirot turned to Lionel, whose fingers twitched as if longing for his sketchbook. Monsieur Harwood, you resented your father's control, his refusal to fund your art. The jewels, they would have freed you. Did you know of them? Lionel's eyes flashed with anger. I knew father was hiding something, but not jewels. He cut me off, called my work a waste. If I'd known about a fortune, I'd have confronted him, not killed him. Evelyn's laugh was sharp, cutting through the tension. Oh, Lionel, don't play the martyr. Father was a tyrant, and we all had reason to hate him. But let's not pretend you're above it all. Poirot's gaze shifted to her, his head tilting slightly. Mademoiselle Evelyn, your spirit is fierce, but your heart is bound to Dr. Vance. Your father opposed your engagement, did he not? A motive, perhaps, to remove an obstacle. Evelyn's defiance faltered, her voice low. I loved Malcolm, and father's disapproval hurt, but I wouldn't kill for it. Besides, Malcolm was poisoned. Does that sound like something I'd do? Dr. Vance cleared his throat, his voice weak but steady. Monsieur Poirot, I had no quarrel with Sir Reginald beyond his disapproval. The poison, I believe it was meant for someone else, perhaps Clara, given the placement of the cup. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. A point well noted, Doctor. The poison, it was a clumsy act, unlike the precision of the dagger that killed Sir Reginald. This suggests either a second hand or a deliberate misdirection. He turned at last to Beatrice Lyle, whose hands were folded tightly in her lap, her composure a fragile veneer. Mademoiselle Lyle, you have been the shadow in this drama, always watching, always silent. Your father's obsession with the Codex Aurore brought you to this house, did it not? A quest for knowledge or for vengeance? Beatrice's eyes met his, a flicker of defiance in their depths. My father was ruined by his pursuit of the Codex, yes. I came here to escape that legacy, to serve Clara. I had no reason to harm Sir Reginald. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. And yet, mademoiselle, you overheard arguments, saw faces in the storm, and knew of the Codex's significance. I put it to you that you knew more, much more. He paused, letting the silence stretch, then clapped his hands sharply, the sound startling the room. Let us reconstruct the crime. Sir Reginald was stabbed in this very library, with a dagger from his own collection. The window was ajar, but no intruder entered. The dust was undisturbed. The Codex remained untouched, suggesting it was not the true target. The jewels, hidden in the vault, were the prize. But only one among you had the knowledge and the motive to act. He turned to Lionel. You, monsieur, had the resentment, but not the precision. Your anger is too raw, too unfocused. To Evelyn, you, mademoiselle, had the passion, but your love for Dr. Vance stayed your hand. To Clara, you, madame, were a victim of fear, not a perpetrator of violence. To Vance, you, doctor, were a target, not a killer. His gaze settled on Beatrice, his voice dropping to a low, resonant cadence. Mademoiselle Lyle, it is you who wove this web. Your father's ruin was tied to the Codex, a manuscript Sir Reginald acquired at great cost. You came to Blackthorn not as a companion, but as a seeker of justice or revenge. You learned of the jewels, perhaps through your father's papers, and saw a chance to reclaim what you believed was yours. You stabbed Sir Reginald, using his own dagger, knowing the jewels were his true legacy. The poison for Dr. Vance was meant for Madame Harwood, to silence her growing suspicions, but it was poorly aimed, a mistake born of haste. Beatrice's composure shattered, her hands trembling as she rose. You can't prove it, she cried, her voice breaking. I didn't. I couldn't. Poirot raised a hand, his voice unrelenting. The smudge on the Codex's lectern, mademoiselle. It matches the ink on your embroidery needle, a stain from your work. The face in the storm, it was a fiction, a distraction to cast suspicion outward. And the visitor you overheard, It was a memory of your father's tales, twisted to fit your purpose. Beatrice sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. He destroyed my father, she whispered. Sir Reginald cheated him, took the codex, left us with nothing. I wanted justice. I wanted him to pay. Inspector Grange stepped forward, his face grim. That's enough, Miss Lyle. You'll come with me. As Beatrice was led away, the room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling like dust. Clara wept softly. Lionel stared blankly, and Evelyn clutched Vance's hand. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Hastings, still stunned, murmured, "How did you know, Poirot? It was all so tangled. The little grey cells, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice soft. "They see the truth where others see only shadows." The library grew quiet, the Codex Aurora, a silent witness to the tragedy it had sparked. Outside, the Moors whispered, their secrets, at last, laid bare. Chapter 8. The Moors' Silence. The dawn broke over the Yorkshire Moors with a clarity that seemed to cleanse the air of Blackthorn Manor's lingering shadows. The mist had retreated, revealing the rolling hills in their stark, rugged beauty, as if the landscape itself exhaled in relief at the unmasking of Beatrice Lyle's guilt. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the Manor's gravel drive, his overcoat immaculate despite the early hour, his green eyes surveying the horizon. The case was solved, the murderer apprehended, yet there was a solemnity in his posture, a recognition of the human frailties that had woven this tragedy. Captain Hastings, beside him, adjusted his scarf against the morning chill, his face a mix of relief and melancholy. "I say, Poirot," he said, his voice subdued. "It's over, isn't it? Beatrice confessed. The jewels are safe, and yet it feels unfinished somehow. All that pain for a handful of gems." Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze distant. "Mon ami, it is never the gems alone that drive such acts. It is the heart, its wounds, its desires, its memories. Beatrice Lyle sought justice for her father, but in her vengeance she lost herself. The Moors, they are silent now, but they have borne witness to much. The manor behind them was quiet, its inhabitants grappling with the aftermath of the revelation. Clara Harwood, pale and withdrawn, had retreated to her room, mourning not only her husband, but the betrayal of her companion. Lionel Harwood, his brooding nature softened by shock, had taken to sketching the Moors, as if seeking solace in their vastness. Evelyn Harwood, her sharp edges blunted by the ordeal, remained at Dr. Malcolm Vance's side, their engagement now unopposed but tempered by the cost. Vance himself, recovering slowly from the belladonna poisoning, had expressed gratitude to Poirot, though his guarded demeanour lingered. Inspector Grange had departed with Beatrice in custody, her confession securing her fate. The jewels, retrieved from the vault beneath the old oak, were locked in the manor's safe, awaiting legal disposition. The Codex Aurora, its secrets unveiled, rested in the library, a relic of a past that had claimed too many lives. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, Tom Rourke, the groundskeeper, approached, his weathered face etched with a mix of respect and unease. "You've done it, sir," he said, tipping his cap. "Cleared the air like. But them Moors, they'll always hold secrets, mark my words." Poirot inclined his head, his expression enigmatic. "Monsieur Rourke, the Moors are but a mirror of the human soul. They keep what we give them, nothing more. Au revoir." The carriage that had brought them to Blackthorn Manor now waited to return them to the station. As they climbed aboard, Hastings glanced back at the manor's grey stone facade, its towers stark against the sky. "Do you think they'll ever recover, Poirot? The Harwoods, I mean. After all this?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his fingers precise. "Time, Hastings, it heals, but it does not erase. The Harwoods will carry their scars, but they will endure. The human spirit, it is resilient. even in the face of betrayal. The carriage rolled away, the manor fading into the distance, swallowed by the Moors' embrace. The train journey back to London was quiet, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels a counterpoint to Poirot's reflective silence. Hastings, ever curious, broke the quiet. "How did you know it was Beatrice, Poirot? I mean, really know? There were so many possibilities. Lionel's resentment, Evelyn's defiance, even Clara's fear." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but assured. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see only chaos. Beatrice's story was too neat, her feint too convenient. The ink on her needle, the smudge on the lectern, these were the threads that tied her to the crime. But more than that, it was her motive, her father's ruin, a wound that festered for years. The codex was her obsession, as it was Sir Reginald's, but for her, it was a symbol of loss." Hastings nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "It's a grim business, Poirot. All that death and deceit for a fortune no one even knew existed." "Oui," Poirot agreed, his gaze turning to the window, where the moors gave way to fields and villages. "But such is the nature of greed and vengeance. They blind the heart to reason, and in their wake they leave only sorrow." As the train neared London, Poirot's thoughts turned to the next challenge, the next puzzle that awaited. Blackthorn Manor was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its ghosts at rest. The Moors, silent at last, held no more mysteries for Hercule Poirot. He adjusted his gloves, his mind already alert for the whisper of the next crime.